the first question will base itself on the entry point of the respective people who are here into the movement, the women's movement, into the theory of feminism, into the politics of feminism. At what point did you join the movement and how did it happen to you? I will start with Chand. Over to you, Chand.
Yeah, thank you, Asmi. Yeah, so sorry, my internet is a little shaky, so my video will go on and on. So basically, I was my entry. I can't really name one particular point where I would say that, oh, I joined the feminist movement or oh, I joined the women's movement. For me, I think I realized my privileges and my marginalizations somewhere while I was in college. And that's when I figured out that what I was thinking of as equality is feminism. That's what it is. And, but of course, and when you say you're a feminist, you're targeted for it, especially if you're having a male body in that sense. So then, but I never really like got into these debates, but it was a journey for me as I read more. And once I entered this for my master's, I think I read more about gender and I started questioning the concept of gender in itself. So during our foundation courses, we were studying about how the idea of gender in itself is socially constructed. And that's when it really hit me. And it's very strange because while I think I've always been this way, it is through academia that I understood my gender identity. And I realized that I'm not cis in that sense, that I'm non-binary. So I guess that would be like my formal awakening into the women's movement. And I think since then, it's the more you study about it, you start seeing it even more. And then you start realizing how you're privileged in certain ways and how you're marginalized in certain ways. And it's never a binary, it's a spectrum. And it's like a cloud. I see it as a cloud of marginalizations and privileges. And figuring that out and then being a part of movements, different movements, being a part of the anti-caste movement, queer movement, the trans movement, especially when we were protesting against the Trans Act and the trans bill, of course. We did it for so long, it still got passed anyway. So looking into all of that, I guess, was a learning experience and formalized my entry into the women's movement, the queer movement, all these movements, intersectional movements, and understanding that having a central realization, that is that we are living in a world which is built on the oppression of some. And the nature of structural violence is so fickle is because we ourselves benefit and are also violated by the same thing. So understanding how the world in itself is fundamentally unjust has been my biggest realization as a feminist, and it is something that I want to work on and try and undo to my extent as much as possible. So that's what I have to say about that. Thank you, Asmi.
Thank you so much, Chand. Thank you. I have made a horrible mistake. Everybody, please forgive me. I was reading out the names from a paper and it kind of got misplaced. I'm really, really sorry. I publicly apologize. I have not introduced Satabdi Dash, who's a very important person here, a very, very important part of the junior group. I'm really sorry, Satabdi. And I really earnestly request you to please get back in. I'm very sorry. I would introduce Satabdi Dash right away. Yes, Satabdi is a gender rights activist, an author, and a teacher from West Bengal. She's the author of Naribadi Chithi O Onnanno, Feminist Letters and Others, and Anandonik Golpo Sankolon, The Unaesthetic Stories. She is the editor of Thade Thare Ghor, A House by the Canyon, a book on domestic violence. She is one of the editors of a socialist feminist web mag in Bengali called Mama. I'm really sorry once again. It was completely a mistake, and the mistake was on my part, and I genuinely apologize. Please, Shatabdi, I would really, really urge you to not take it personally. I'm really sorry. The the document just got misplaced. I'm very, very sorry. I'm really sorry. Uh, I would is Shatabdi here or
Yeah, Asmi, I'm here. I'm here.
I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. I really apologize with all my heart. I misplaced the document. I was reading from it. I was a little anxious because of this whole event. It's kind of new to me as well. And I made a mistake. So I would really urge you to not take it personally and please come back. And I would like to like Shatabdi to take over and start with her entry point into the movement. Please, Shatabdi, over to you.
Okay, Asmi, I was a bit confused, uh, but it's okay. I don't know if I'm the first speaker here. Has anyone spoken, Asmi, for me?
Yes, Chand has spoken before you.
Okay. Okay, so as Asmi has told about me, I'm from Kolkata, a teacher and author and gender activist. And I think while talking about the entry point, people are getting a little formal and sharing their first experience of being involved in the movements, but they're missing the moment of realization, the moment of coming out of the closet, and the moment that is rather personal than collective. But as the second wave has taught us, the personal is political and is of due importance. So when someone told me that I sound like a feminist, it was I'm afraid that it was it came as a note of appreciation, and I was rather rebuked and denounced for being so. And actually, long after that, it happened so that I was having a divorce after episodes of domestic violence, and in spite of having been initiated of theoretical feminism, I fell victim to domestic violence, and after that, some activist handed me some literature on domestic violence in order to help me understand better what a devastating cycle I myself was into, and that was changing me a lot, as I thought that the silence that remains regarding this sphere should be addressed, regarding intimate partner violence, I mean, should be addressed, and one should be more vocal, and one should demystify the myths surrounded around domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So I started an initiative on domestic violence and intimate partner violence, an organization which is called UWSN, that is United Women's Solidarity Network, that has also worked a great deal during the lockdown, taking calls 24 hours for domestic violence victims. And a year back, I was offered by some publisher to edit an anthology on domestic violence, which is one of the very first books on domestic violence in Bengali. It is called Khadir Dhare Ghar, as Ashmi has mentioned. And this is what you can call my entry point. And afterwards, I have also founded with my comrades another organization called Soul, that is Speak Out United and Loud, to stand against sexual violence post Me Too scenario. And I'm also working at present on school curriculum, that is uniting teachers to analyze how the syllabus, school syllabus in West Bengal is gendered and sexist, and for that matter, how to improve it. That's it.
Thank you so much, Shatabdi. We'll go on to Ekabali now. Ekabali, could you please elaborate on your entry point in the women's movement? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not. I Before I go into that, I just wanted to say I don't know how many of you know this, but Dr. Shorojit Jana, who's one of the key organizers behind the sex workers movement in West Bengal, has died of COVID today. And I just wanted to start off my talk by just paying my respect to him and to say that I have seen the man work very closely and just have an immense amount of respect for the kind of work he and Durbar has done for sex workers here. So just wanted to tell people that and let that be out there that Dr. Jana was an amazing person. Uh, anyway, about that. So, as far as my own journey is concerned and how I got into the feminist movement per se, uh, well, I don't know if there is, how to define the word movement. Is activism movement? Is what I do on my daily basis movement? Because what is an activist in that sense? I started off. I have always known right from my childhood, and I know this is true for like plenty of others on the panel here, that there was something implicitly and explicitly wrong with the state of how women are treated. And I have known this ever since I can remember, because my mother is a survivor of domestic abuse. She walked out on my father when I was 7 years old. She tolerated domestic abuse for 9 years because you know women, how like economically underpowered women, so on and so forth. So since then I've always had this sense of resistance that I'm going to that there's something missing, there's something wrong with the state of the world. So that happened, and in my teenage I realized that I was not like other children. I was queer, I was attracted to women and men both together. So those two realizations they were always there at the back of my mind. In 2013, when homosexuality was decriminalized in India, that was the moment when I first walked in a rally. That was, as far as I can remember, wanting to walk in a rally, wanting to protest, wanting to have my voice heard, not just within the confines of the domestic sphere, but outside. That was the moment I can, so sort of spot that was when I wanted to go out and have my voice heard in 2013. After that, I remained dormant for like a couple more years until I experienced sexual violence in the university space. So after, I mean, that was another eye-opening, I find it very difficult to talk about it, sorry. But there was another moment when I realized that something needed to be done, that unities and solidarities needed to be formed. I started protesting. I got in touch with a few other activists. They were very welcoming of me. Joyanti herself was one of them. So I have an immense amount of respect for Joyanti. As many other feminist activists like her, older or younger. We got together. A lot of young activists, feminist activists, they from Jadavpur, from SRFTI, which is a film school in Calcutta. We got together, we formed an organization of sexual violence survivors in university and workspaces. We called it Women Against Sexual Harassment, short form WASH. It was quite tacky. We laughed about it. We made posters. Wherever sexual violence, wherever survivors used to come out and say that, I've experienced sexual violence in the university in such and such spot. We used to go there with like, with colors and such, mark the space and say molestation happens here. And just as a reminder of where, say, how common sexual violence is in the spaces that we inhabit. So we used to do that. Then I got involved with Dosh Theke Dosh Hajar, which is another activist network of several feminist, plenty of feminist and other gender and sexuality organizations. And from there, it was the standard practice of organizing, building communities, going to rallies, making programs happen, going door to door, whatever, like raising money, the usual trajectory of what an activist is. My bigger concern is in this entire journey of my own self is that when do I call myself a part of the movement? When I'm a 3-year-old child who sees her mother being abused at home and realizes that there's something implicitly wrong with the world, or when I'm a 26-year-old woman who's extremely out and loud about violence against women, has a language to frame it in that sense, the rhetoric. Or when I was an 18-year-old who knew there was something wrong with how queers were being treated in 2013, but did not have the rhetoric to frame it, who did not have the rhetoric of feminism which she learned in college. So I'm still trying to sort of navigate my way through all of that. I think that pretty much is the history of how I got involved in what we call, in an umbrella term, the movement. So, and I think so many others have the same kind of experiences as me. So thank you so much. Over to you, Ashmi.
Thank you so much, Ekabali. We will now go on to Rehma and ask of her entry point into this particular movement. Over to you, Rehma.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I believe my journey being a feminist started with when I realized I'm an other in the social categorization of my peers. It's like something was different. So when I was 13 or 14 years old, I used to think that maybe it's because of my skin color or the way I used to appear back then. But it was only when I grew up I knew that the reason were far more worse. I guess my feminist journey started with comments like, only boys can do this, or only if you were a boy, it's okay if you do this. And these comments did not sit well with me. I remember wanting to become a chef, and my father telling that it was not safe for me to be a chef. So I guess there are a number of experiences which I faced as a child growing up, and till then, my feminist observations like the idea of feminism or the idea of being a feminist was concentrated on how women were being treated around me, how uh, sex workers were treated, or domestic helps were treated, rural women were discriminated, and how it was okay to be discriminated or discriminate those women, like they were not even human, I guess. So when I was in my college, I took up women's studies as my general subject, and that's when Asmi ma'am came to my life. And I remember it was in her class that she asked that how many of your mothers are working women, and I remember me not raising my hand, like me and 20 other girls were not raising our hand, and then she was surprised and disappointed with us and said that all of your mothers are working women, few are paid and the rest are unpaid. What I felt that day was embarrassed and ashamed of me being unaware. Like, this is something which stirred something inside me, and when I started addressing like all those issues and all those discriminations that I've observed being growing up, they were for a reason. And I used to study and address those issues, like, okay, there's a problem that needs to be addressed. So right now I have educated myself. I have educated myself of the discrimination and of the, the superficial ones and the deep-seated ones, the just trying to be funny discrimination, or the actual sexism. It can be racism or anything, and all those issues. Right now I feel that I can I have I have been able to trace the reason why this is happening. So right now, when I talk about identity politics, or I talk about intersectional or all-inclusive feminism, I think that this is really important. So I am both for and against identity politics in a way that identity, I am for protection of identity, like all these women, all these men, trans men and women, and all the castes and classes that we have been labeled. These are important to be recognized. These issues are important. And I am against identity politics in a sense that politicization of these discriminations and somehow legalizing them and reinforcing them, that it's okay to discriminate people who are weaker than you, or maybe who are considered to be weaker. I guess that does not sit well with me, and hence I am here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahma, and thank you for recounting that incident. I instinctively remembered that day in class at Lady Brabant. Thank you. It was a very happy remembrance for me. We'll go on to Bhavya Rathi, and we'll ask Bhavya to tell us about her entry point into the movement. Over to you, Bhavya.
Hello, hi everyone. First, I would say it is amazing that this is happening. I'm very honored to be here talking to all of you. My entry point into the movement, I believe that feminism is deeply integrated with self-identification. The second you start identifying yourself as a person and not just as a part of society and not just as someone's child and someone's something else, but your own self, that is your first step towards feminism. And for me, I would remember clearly, it was in class 7, because that's when I noticed that the words of a woman in society and the words of a man in society are not at par. The power, respect is just given to a man, while a woman has to fight for it, earn it, demand it, and still she may or may not get it. That is what motivated me into law. What I remember coming home from school one day and just telling my parents that I'm going to be a lawyer. And they were like, oh, she's in class 7. She's going to change her mind in like a week or something. And when I do study law, when I am studying law, what I see is when I practice law, like law is an endless thing. But what I see is that while there is oppression, while there is everything, we are taking steps. There are people around us everywhere, every day making efforts. From maybe they are not the best efforts, maybe some of them are misguided. But my view towards feminism is an ongoing struggle which has started 200 years ago and is going to continue way beyond my lifespan. And I just want to contribute whatever I can to this struggle. My view on feminism is that the minute any person realizes that this thing in society is wrong, it is not how it's supposed to be, this is not correct, you have become a feminist. You may not use that term, you may not know that term, you may not understand the intricacies involved with the movement, but you have taken your first step, and that is what matters. That's all I would like to say, actually.
Thank you so much, Bhavya. So we have, talked about the entry point into feminism by the junior group through their own words. I will now move on to a senior group, and I would just, start off with connecting the two groups together. And many of us, or rather most of us, we know about the entry points of the veterans who are here. but I would still urge them, to begin. And I would like to start with Mary.E.John ma'am, and just ask them about, that one moment or too many moments where she had felt that she was stepping into the women's movement. So I would like to know what that moment, or what that time, or what that one or two, or several incidents were for her. Because we have, as all of the seniors are well known, and we have read about you, we have read your works, while all of us, while doing our courses. It is, we have certain, biographies out there, but we are not looking at them right now in this particular conversation. We would like to go a little more personal, and we would like to know about those movements that when you have felt connected for the first time to this movement. I would start with Mary.E.John ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Asmi. I don't know if I should begin by actually suggesting that you start with Meera Velayudhan rather than myself, because if you're interested in the generational aspect and the historical aspect, that is to say, the time, you're all of the present in some ways, and it's marvelous to listen to you all. I feel that in terms of I'm 64 years old as of now, but in terms of my age, I'm actually something of a latecomer. I came into feminism probably in the 80s, and I think that someone like Meera would actually give you it would be fun to get a sense of history as well as a sense of the personal. So I don't know, Meera, if I'm being unfair to you, but I feel that Meera is in fact more of a pioneer than I am. And I would look to her to begin, and then I'll follow. I promise I won't. I'm not saying I won't. That is not my. I'm not hiding behind Meera at all. But if Meera could start, I think it would be more interesting to set the historical and the intergenerational. That's just a suggestion from my side.
Yeah, I'd like to really thank Professor Shampa Sen, who's sitting in Cambridge, for introducing me and saying, are you interested in this Women's History Conclave? And particularly Samita, because Samita is a leading labor historian. And we've been associated for a long time through Women's Studies Association. And I think what really drew me initially to Samita's letter was that, this whole thing of looking into creating new knowledge through archives, through different kind of inquiries and different kinds of databases. And this actually is part of my very much interesting to me, that I find looking into inquiries, archives, research, movements, I find it very exciting. And always think that, through different efforts, always a belief in change. So I think that is the reason why I joined. And I'd really like to thank Aparna and Bhaswati and of course, Asmi is actually, we are intergenerational really, but we are close friends and we almost interact every day for the past 2 years at least. And so I'd really like to thank this group for this kind of conversations. And I told Asmi that I'm not preparing any structure. You've given these questions. She asked me, what do you think? I said, you write whatever you want, but I'm not going to have any structured kind of write-ups or anything. I'll just respond to the conversations. So firstly, let me say that my hearing, when you categorize as senior and junior, I think after the presentations earlier, I think we can do away with the junior-senior part of it, this hierarchical kind of thing, and say that we are sort of different periods we have come in to the movement in different ways, in diverse locations, diverse histories we're linked in, and our personal journeys also are so diverse, So in that sense, we don't need to be senior and junior in any sense, But points, coming to the question about points of entry, it's a very, it's very difficult, I think, even for Mary and all of us, that to exactly pinpoint when we really entered the movement or anything, because for me personally, I mean, my family, my parents, I think their histories from, covering varied modernities from anti-caste movements in the pre-independence area to social reform to the freedom struggle to being part of the Constituent Assembly. I mean, these are sort of and some elements of socialism. These are sort of these are memories. I think, in as historians, when you try to recreate this intergenerational, this is something which I really grapple with in terms of like how do I link these kind of experiences of say my mother or the family and their experiences, and if I'm narrating my own, how do I look at memories, how do I look at how they articulate their experiences. And I think this is a very significant methodological point for history historians, and it's something I think there's no answer to it because there are different kind of locations, social locations, and intersecting also along these different power grids in society that you're addressing when you sort of try to write it up. And so I would say, but personally for me, I think late 70s, the post emergency period, and it's actually a period which was very, very much a lot of conversations were going on, a lot of alliances were getting formed, and being in the university at that particular stage, I think I would say that, we had our feet in many things as students. I was also, I used to work part time also, and there were also like in the university, you were part of. I think what I would definitely, which is a defining thing, is I was also linked with some platform or some committee, women's committee, or some organization or group. So there was always an organizational link in my activities. Though, you might have your foot, you're reading, you're sort of interacting to various protests, you're going into various protests, whether it's the railway strike or the farm labor in Mairoli, or whether it's the construction workers in JNU, where it you have your foot in all these things, and as well as you're reading maybe in a group or in a women's committee in JNU, which is not linked with any political group. And we were reading, I remember in the hostel reading Our Bodies Ourselves, the Boston Women's Collective, to girls in the hostel. We were also reading left literature from Trotsky to Marx, and so there were there was a very rich kind of debate. We were also interacting internationally. It was a period of multilateralism. So I think that's very significant. So we were also reading a lot of international literature at that period and the debates that were following. And I think my sort of association, the first one was my mother in 1977 holding a Dalit women's conference in Delhi of Ambedkarite women. And I was just a student at that time, and we used to just do collections and all, not really part of the organization or anything. But I think that was the first kind of, from marginalized spaces, organization getting formed and the kind of debate. It was not very clear what is the agenda or anything, but I think ideas were coming together. And contrary to what Asmi said, the period was where we are sort of actually trying to get together through different kind of ideas. And that it is only through that, also the Manushi magazine, it's through the JNU and student movement of Delhi University, Gita Ramakrishnan, that the Manushi, 10 or 11 women came to start the Manushi Women's Collective. And in fact, that time there was a big discussion on what should we name it? Will it be a socialist women's magazine? Or finally we sort of named it Women and, Women in Society. So, because the debate within the collective itself, so that is a kind of discussion going on. And it's through that, the Manushi, that I actually met Dr. Veena Mazumdar, because she came as a publisher. I met her and I wrote this, in the first issue, I wrote this piece on Dalit women's struggles that were ongoing. And I think it attracted her, and then I was invited to join the ICSR Women's Committee. These are institutional experiences of how ideas, can be, new ideas can be brought about through institutions. So ICSR had a women's unit, women's studies unit, and um, since Dr. Veena Mazumdar invited me, I joined there and I used to do. And that's, I think, where the international aspects became, and the policy aspects became the international uh, planning and policy and human rights, which sort of came to me in a big way, particularly because she was also preparing the document for the non-aligned movement, the women and development chapter of the non-aligned movement, and I would be collecting material for that. So in a sense that we really, there's something about colonization and decolonization sort of actually was coming up, not in a very defined manner, but they sort of came into our readings and our minds. So there were these sort of multiple levels of in which one was getting exposed to various kind of ideas, and also organize. Since I said everything is through organization, institutions, platforms, committees, we had a foot on everything. A big belief in change, and also I think very much about marginalized spaces from where knowledge is created. The histories are there, the experiences are there. I think this came up in all the experience, whether it's the Women's Committee in JNU, or whether it's the Manushi, or whether it's the ICSR Women's Committee, which came up. I think those were the early sort of years, and in which, and also the left, I was also part of Trotskyist group in JNU. We had a discussion. So the household debate came up at that time. The housework debate actually emerged in the late 70s, and there was a whole Maxine Molyneux and people at that stage. So we also sort of were discussing it within a Marxist framework. We also were discussing whether what is the form of, I think it came up in a big way in the Trotskyist group, is where does women's group stand in a left organization? And say what was defined as a Leninist concept of organization. Where do, and we formed a separate women's group. We sort of saying that whether it exists or not, we are forming a group. So it was like women's, a lot of inquiry into forms of organization, strategies of struggle. At the same time, I think there was a lot of conversations going on and readings. And particularly, the early 80s in particular, I think the late 80s on Fatima Merisi, Elena Leacock, and Naval, and all of them, these readings sort of, and also Kumari Jayawardene, So the international dimension, the intersectional and international dimension, in a sense, that sort of emerged very strongly. And for me, of course, was very much, part of also what is called marginalized spaces, means in the sense that the whole knowledge creation, which not just it emerged from, say, Black women's movement or Dalit movement or Dalit women's movement, but it already existed. Those knowledges, that they already existed, and it's as historians or as people in this field of gender, we have to sort of bring it out, and part of pedagogy, and what are the, how do you make it transformational? How do you make alliances? So I think there were all these, I would say, were sort of very key dimensions of the early kind of. I can't say joining or anything, but it's the early sort of associational kind of experiences. I think for the first question, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would, ma'am, Mary, ma'am, is it okay for, would
Yes.
you, okay. Over to you, Mary, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you all. Shamita, of course, I know. Joyanti, I know. Nirmala, I know. But all of you are new to me. So this is a really remarkable occasion, and congratulations for doing something so brave and difficult as to want to create a conversation. And I think I partly agree with Meera. I think I completely agree with Meera on the issue of it not being so much a question of generation as a question of time, location, history, memory, and so on for those of us who are now older. At the same time, I have encountered, and I say this in part as a teacher, I have encountered a sense of perhaps there is also generational, but the generational question actually multiplies. You know, your note gives one the feeling that there are two generations, the ones in and the ones who are becoming. But actually the ones who are in were also in a process of becoming. And the ones who are becoming have also had have probably in at this point in some ways, and others feel less in. So, you know, where do we draw the lines is a very interesting question. I can say, unlike Meera, I can say maybe in part because of where I grew up. I grew up in the city of Bangalore as a young person, as in school and my initial undergraduate years. And I did not encounter a movement, a women's movement or feminism. And I would say that those aspects that were to develop, I think, in my own life, personally, as politically, in whatever shape, therefore, or whether it's a therefore, I don't know, they actually developed somewhat later. And I'm very conscious of the fact that in my formative phase, my first encounters with what I think of as being political were rather strongly shaped by the idea of my having privilege in a world where there was so much inequality. So the fact that I was female did not present itself as being a big issue. I thought I could sort it out. I thought I could, as an individual, I was not particularly sexually active. I thought of myself as an individual. I thought I could, you know, that these were not the most important issues in my life, and that it was indeed social and economic inequality that I saw all around me, that these were the most formative issues of the time, which resulted in the fact that though I did an undergraduate degree in the sciences, and that too physics, mathematics, and so on, I ended up spending more of my time being socially active outside of college, and I ended up pinning all my hopes to a master's degree in JNU. This is the first time I came to JNU was in 1979. And there too, I think I was so, and I'm very fascinated by Meera's descriptions. And I too was, if there was any group that attracted me, it was the Trotskyite group. But I did not, in fact, discover feminism there. I would say that I still thought of it as secondary in some fashion to the primacy of class and other forms of inequality. And I would even say, I've written about this in my own earlier work. It took, in my case, I think, a profound displacement. I did my graduate studies, my PhD studies in the US in the 1980s. And it was California in the 1980s. And there is no way, absolutely no way, that you are going to not be encountering in every level, personal, sexual, academic, and so on, issues of feminism and movement questions. And so I would say that I would locate my own recognition. And I think one of you pointed this out. Where do you begin the story? Does it begin with realizations of inequality? Where does it begin? I would say that in my case, a more open recognition of issues pertaining to my own identity as female really took shape only in the 1980s. And what I would now say was a suppression of my being female. I thought of myself as an androgynous person, I think, when I was growing up. I also happen to come from a biracial family. My mother is not Indian. And I think all of those things contributed to my actually, in some way, suppressing personal issues. They came out much more fully in the highly sexualized context of California in the 1980s and the kind of program I was a part of, where many things then came together. Feminism came together with race issues, with sexuality issues, with third world colonial questions. And I had to position myself in this very complex terrain as a third world woman, yet encountering at so many levels all of these questions. And so it is only subsequently that when I came back to India in 1991, married, soon having a baby, no job, as it so happens, a wife. One of the worst things to be in some contexts is to just be a wife without a job. Those were the moments when I had to then live my feminism. And this was in the city of Hyderabad, where I spent some of my initial years of the 1990s. And I was grateful to have excellent people around me at the Hyderabad Central University and in Anveshi Women's Center, Research Center, where without a job, I was in a position to be active. And I think those were probably my most activist years, because all that I was a part of, anti-rape movements, caste movements, were precisely outside of any kind of teaching position. So that's where I would locate my beginning. And of course, after that, you don't look back. So it was, I ended up coming to Delhi later in the late 1990s and so on. I won't go into all that. But it was a delayed, let me put it on the table. In my case, I would say it took its time. I didn't identify initially. And when I did, it was a very, very remarkable moment for me. I was already in my 30s when that happened. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. We would go on to Joyanti Sen. Ma'am, are you here? Would you like to? Joyanti Sen. Okay.
I don't think Joyanti is
Yeah, she
present
just
now.
left. Yes, ma'am. She
I think
just left
so.
for. Ma'am, we will. Okay, Joyanti Sen.
No. She has joined.
No,
Just
Joyanti
Yes,
is
she has
online.
yeah. Yes.
We would now call upon Joyanti Sen to talk about her entry point into this movement. Thank you, ma'am.
Joyanti, please unmute yourself.
জয়ন্তী দি দেখো নিচে একটা আছে প্যানেল আছে বড় বড় করে, সেখানে ক্যামেরাওয়ালা আইকনটাকে আনমিউট করো।
ক্যামেরাওয়ালা না, the other one.
হ্যাঁ মাইকওয়ালাটা সরি, মাইকটা ওটা প্রেস করলে হয়ে যাবে। ক্যামেরাটা আনমিউট করলে ছবি আসবে অবভিয়াসলি।
এই নিচে আইকন আছে দেখো মাইকে।
I'm guessing she has some issues because she's left the meeting yet again.
I think there is an internet glitch also involved. Okay, ma'am is here again. I will just wait.
She's pressing the wrong button, ma. ওই লাল বাটনটাকে টিপো না, ওটা টিপলে তুমি বেরিয়ে যাচ্ছ মিটিং থেকে। যেটা মাইকের একটা ছবি, ওই বাটনটাকে টেপো। যেটা লাল রঙের একটা ফোনের মতন দেখতে, ওইটাকে টিপো না। না, এই ভুল বাটনটা টিপে দিচ্ছে বারবার আমার মনে হয়।
phone tab
Why,
now.
why don't you start, Shampa, and then I will talk to her on the phone and help her.
Okay, ma'am. Shampa, ma'am, would you like to?
Thanks for this opportunity. What do you want me to speak? The entry into the movement.
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, we all, as you know, we were getting to hear a lot of more personal, incidences, or as Mary ma'am said, that I have come way later. It was a delayed entry. And so these are the things that we do not get in your biographies everywhere that we read about. Or I would like to know about those moments of realization that you were stepping into a movement, or you are in a movement already, or you're associated with it. If you could elaborate on that, it would be very nice.
It's very difficult for me to pinpoint like when. I don't think there is a fixed moment or fixed day. What I can share with you is I am the second daughter of a very ordinary middle class Bengali family. So when a daughter is born, and I'm 56 years old now. So 50 years ago, when a second child is born, the parents expect that it will be a son. And of course, I was born, and there were disappointments in the family. And these were not the things that were people thought of keep it in under the carpet or anything. There were a lot of discussions within the family gatherings. We thought this one will be a son. একটা ছেলে হলে ভালো হতো. Who will take care if of your parents, if you are not if there is not a boy child, all those discussions. I think everything makes you like the whole particularly your childhood, as we all know, the experiences that we share as a child, like within family, when your parents are discussing this, your masi, your aunts and uncles, everyone is discussing this. Somewhere it affects you, and you want to change that. And that comes from within. That you, and I don't think any kind of I don't have any educational background where I learned. I mean, of course, women's studies were not there when we started our activism.
Hello.
Joyanti, we can hear you.
হ্যাঁ জয়ন্তী দি, হ্যাঁ
কিন্তু তুমি এখন একটু ওয়েট করো, শম্পা বলছে, তারপরে বলো।
প্রত্যেকবার জয়েন করি, আজকে কেন জানি না হচ্ছে না।
হয়েছে, সব ঠিক আছে মা, জয়েন করে গেছো, শোনা যাচ্ছে, জাস্ট ওয়েট করো একটু, শম্পা বলছে, তারপরে তুমি বলো।
আচ্ছা, ওকে ওকে, ঠিক আছে। আর ওয়েট টিল শম্পা ফিনিশেস।
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Somebody could you?
Yeah. So I think it's there within you, and no amount of theory, no amount of books, no amount of outside material. I mean, those comes as additional information. I mean, that's what I firmly believe, that it has to be that the extreme form of discrimination that as faced, and most of us faced it within families. And I'm talking about this because I mean, we all love our families. It's not like you are sort of having a very negative relationship with your parents or something like that. And it's not abuse in that sense. There's some physical abuse or something. It's just a general sense of discrimination that was prevailing throughout my childhood, and I think that's something you want to change. That you don't want other people who are unwanted within families to feel that. And I personally feel that makes a big when I say that, and my particular interest with working with people with disability, children with disabilities, because disabled people are unwanted in their families. No one wants them. Our law doesn't want them.
হ্যাঁ
Even
বলবো
the
এবার আরেকজন বলছে
yeah. So I mean, and those kind of senses make you feel that you want to bring in change. Uh, I was a student of literature, and of course, I mean, a lot of people ask me why, if you wanted to do this work, why didn't you study sociology, political science? Because I'm into disability work, psychology. But I think literature is a subject that gives you information of all these topics. I mean, people might, it might seem little biased, but the kind of information that if you read literature, you don't have to study sociology. I mean, that's something I believe. And even the understanding of psychology and all other aspects. My first work was actually, I'm the person who worked with Kolkata, that gave me the working with the experience of community work was actually with a group of parents who wanted to come together. All of them had children with intellectual disabilities. And so working, so that was my first job, basically. And so for 6 years, and we didn't have an office. So from typing out one letter to taking the letter to one parent to another parent's house, and bringing up the collective, and when you are working like that, not in a special school setup, not in a very formal setup, you actually learn what kind of discrimination is happening in the community. I lost my father quite early in my life. So my mother was a school teacher, and she was a very, very progressive person as per her time. What I feel is very important is when I wanted to, and these are the questions that still now bothers me, because that time when my mother was retiring from her job, I had to take up a job in a private office because there was no other earning member. And till now, I mean, these are the big questions. And after that, when her retirement issue was solved, when she started getting her pension, I joined Swayam, which is an organization I was the first employee of Swayam, which is an organization that works for violence on women. And when I was working with Swayam, the network Mo3 was created. That was the first time when I met Joyanti, and so if you think it's an official movement work, then you can say that Swayam is maybe the first stepping stone, though I don't feel that. I mean, officially it might be. I think the whole experience that goes before that should be included in, if you are thinking of a person's biography. And these are the questions, even like I said, that in between I had to take a job in a private company. And till now, these are the questions that always comes to us, that though I wanted to remain part of the disability work I was doing previously, I had to leave that job because there was no money in it. So even now when we are doing movements, and I think particularly because there are so many younger people are here today, when you're doing movement, and a lot of discussions happened around when we started Mo3, what is autonomous movement? Should NGOs who get funds are part of autonomous movements? Joyanti will recall all these conversations. This was all and we all felt that, and of course, it's not like there will always be differences of opinion, and there should be. I don't think everyone should have the same opinion, because suppose I want to be a full-timer in a movement. If I am part of if I say that I am a whole-timer in the feminist movement, who is going to pay me the sales? I mean, and this is, again, I am relating it to my personal experience, because I had to leave my development work and had to join private company. and who's going to pay? And so the NGO workers, sometimes people take a job in an NGO, and it's a job. And and many of us actually, which I also did a job at Swayam. But now the most of my activism is actually not paid by anyone. So there's no organization that pays me. So I mean, there's a lot of questions I think we should be talking about and discussing, because we cannot, I mean, how much do you also can do voluntarily, how much you can do, and if I'm doing voluntarily, am I taking that money from my time and resources, whatever I'm spending, am I doing it the cost of my family? You know, I think these questions remain same when we started working. And my job at Swayam was in 1995 or 96. I was the first employee, and today in 2021, I mean, I think this is the question that remains within the movement, and we need to discuss these things in detail. And I hope, I don't know how much time we'll get today, but these are the questions that need to be discussed, because it's very important, because a lot of other women who probably want to be part of this movement may not be able to because of lack of that resources, support of family. So how do we define autonomous women's movement? And is it just a career for some, or is it like part of our lives? For many of us, it's part of our lives. So these are the questions I'd rather think we should discuss than discussing our personal journeys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shampadi. We will go on to Joyanti Sen. Ma'am, please.
Hello. Hello.
You're
Yes,
audible,
ma'am. We can
Joyanti
hear
Di.
you.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
I'm
can hear
audible.
you, Joyanti Di. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you very much.
Joyanti Di,
I'm very
yes.
sorry for
We
being
can
such a
see you,
pest,
we
you
can
know.
hear you.
Happens when you're 80 plus. Suddenly I couldn't join. I usually do manage, but somehow I couldn't manage anyway. My son helped me. Now, entry point. I have to first say that I'm not an academic. I'm an activist. This is the first thing. Secondly, I have to say that all the youngsters, I was fascinated by what they were saying. Absolutely fascinated. And thirdly, I have to say that probably feminism is in my blood, because my great grandmother, Ganada Nandini Devi, was one of the person who was a pioneer of women's movement at that time, during that time when she was the wife of Rabindranath Tagore. So probably it is in my blood. Now, my entry point to women's movement and feminism was Shachetana. I was actually, before that, before joining Shachetana, I had no clue about feminism. I had no clue about anything to do with women's movement. I was helping my husband to run a consultancy firm, and I was fully involved with that. And Chetana actually happened when there was a rape case, Mathura rape case. An Adivasi girl was raped in the Thana, whole night, kept in the Thana whole night. There was a big furor, a lot of national furor, and a lot of, people joined. And we in West Bengal also, in Calcutta also, we joined the uh, there were seminars. We organized seminars. There was one seminar which was attended by Nirmala, Yashodhara, Moitre, etc. And from that seminar, Shachetana evolved. I was not a founder member of Shachetana. I still remember once and actually Shukumari Di she was an eminent Sanskrit scholar. She was also there. She became our first president, and she gave the name Shachetana. I was not there at that time. I remember still one day, Jashodhara, who was a family friend, she came to our house and she asked for 6 plus 6, 12 rupees, and gave us 2 receipts and made myself and Shomita members of Shachetana. Okay, so what? What next? I kept that little piece of receipt with me, Then she started calling me up and asking me to go to meetings, asking me to go to debates, etc. Half of the time I couldn't go because I was very busy. Then one day Nirmala called me up and said that they are going to have it. Ours was a voluntary women's organization. We didn't receive any donation, nothing. It was absolutely voluntary. We were not an NGO. We were a women's organization. And we were organizing a cinema show to raise some money. And Nirmala told me, you better go and get the permission from the government. You have to get government permission. There was a cinema which we were showing at the Priya, and I said, okay, what does one do now? So I went around and got permission, and slowly I started going more and more to Sachetana. Then actually, one Bengali magazine wrote about Sachetana and gave our name and address. Our official address was Nirmala's house, 31 Mahanirmal Road. But Ratnabali Chatterjee, who was also a founder member, she had a small mezzanine room, and most of our we used to meet there twice a week or something. And once this article was published, we were inundated with cases, quote unquote cases, when women used to come. Poor Ratna, early in the morning, women would come, their parents would come and they would ask for help. And then I too got involved there. I too used to go there. That is how I got completely involved with the, with what is called the harassment of women. Not only harassment, the women used to be tortured. They used to come to us, and we had to go to the police station with them. I remember Nirmala, myself, and Ratna. We used to go to the police station, and we were told, "Why don't you go home and read magazine? Why are you harassing us?" Things like that used to happen. Plus, we had debates. We had Malini was our member. She wrote a play. That play was being shown in different parts of Kolkata, in school, colleges, in universities, etc., which created a lot of awareness. Then there was this also written by Malini, Madhur Khala, where there was this monkey, two women would dress as monkeys, and that was also dowry awareness. And there was this play, May Dile Shaje, that was also dowry. So all this was going on, and slowly I got into this movement, and the word feminism I still never understood, but it got into my, but later I realized what is feminism, and now feminism has got into my blood. It is part of me. Being a member of Sachetana changed me completely. I mean, from being a housewife and then from managing my husband's consultancy firm, I got into this movement. I got into this helping women, etc. And now it completely changed my life. Then when in 1990s, slowly after the Beijing conference, there were different NGOs. And as Shampa was talking about Swayam, all of us got together and we formed a group called Moitri. And I used to represent, from Sachetana, I used to represent Moitri. In fact, all the different conferences, debates that used to happen, I used to represent Sachetana. And slowly like that, I became involved, and my entry point is Sachetana. Actually, I was not an academic, I am an activist. And being in Sachetana, I mean, now that I'm there, I mean, I can't imagine life without my Sachetana friends. My Nirmala, Yashodhara, Beladi, Yashodhara is no more, but all the other friends, Chanda Karlekar, Sutapa, all these people, they are part of me. I mean, I can't imagine life without Sachetana friends, and I can't imagine not being a feminist. And this is what I'm going to say, but I also have to say that I'm fascinated by what the juniors said. I'm absolutely fascinated. They are thinking much more deeply than at least I have thought. I have not really gone into the theory of feminism. I have not gone into the all these things that the youngsters are saying, part of their life, because my life, my young childhood was not at all. Uh, I had a very lovely childhood, no problem. But so my entry to Sachetana was something that changed my life.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We would go on to the next point, where we'll talk about points of connection and points of differences between the two groups. Once again, I would like to begin with the, the relatively new, people who have joined in the junior group. And I would like to begin this conversation with Satabdi. And we would just, have one person from the junior and one person from the senior group. And I think that is a better way to go about it, rather than having each person speak for a span, because it's a discussion. And I think let the discussion begin. So now that we have, spoken enough about some of the general points, like entry point into feminism, etc. So we are talking about how we connect, how as juniors we connect to the movement that is right in front of us, with all that has been done in the movement, and where are all the ways that we do not relate to it, and we do not connect to it so much. We feel that things would have been better if done differently. We would be asking the same question to the junior and the senior group alternately. Thank you so much. Let's begin with Satabdi. Satabdi, is that okay for you?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So I think the commonalities are, we have more commonalities than differences, for that matter. As far as feminism seeks to obtain equal rights and privileges and opportunities for women, and to improve their lives and living conditions, particularly in respect to problems that are unique to them, and to change the social attitude that are hostile and derogatory and oppressive to them, and to tend to interfere with any of the foregoing. I think both our generation and what we have heard from the four veterans, we have the same goals. I don't really think that feminism, the bigger goals have changed. Perhaps the contexts have changed a little bit, and but the feminist ideal seems very simple. It's a movement fighting for gender equality, and the moral code, that basic moral code seems as indisputable as a golden rule. So basically, there may have been changes in focus, but not in change in the premise itself. And I would like to point out some differences. Those are actually not differences, but I'd rather call them continuation or evolution. And the first thing is that today's feminism is to recognize diversity. And as Meera ma'am was telling, that the idea of intersectionality, it's not that it is something new, but perhaps I think that though it isn't exactly some sort of sudden epiphany or a sea change in the movement, but rather something that has only slowly been possible to integrate with existing successes. So the first thing is this intersectionality, that today's feminism is to recognize diversity, as one of our comrades has also told us about inclusive feminism. So it is important to realize that not all the women face the same forms of prejudice, and much of that is for their race, and some of them is also for the class they belong to, the caste they belong to. Women of different races have different history of their struggle towards equality, and that constitutes their struggles, that constitutes the wholesome struggle of feminism today. And the thing is that the second thing is that I think feminism, the concerns of feminism has become more nuanced than before. For example, it sprouted from gender movements regarding sexuality, reproduction, domestic violence, etc. But feminist thoughts has now become more variable and nuanced to account for the broader spectrum of personal experiences that women face, and it is necessary to highlight the more what should I say, micro prejudices that are in work. We allow contrived gender norms to illustrate so many details of our lives that we almost unaware, we become biased without almost intending to be so. And our fight is towards accepting that female roles outside of the traditional sphere and destigmatizing female sexuality and talking more and more about consent for that matter. So these are the nuances that has developed with time. And also, I think that just as feminism advocates that women should not have to ascribe to a contrived role, the same thing applies to men as well. Today's feminism also advocates that men should not have to ascribe to a contrived classification of masculinity. So I find it a kind of new development that feminism is becoming more and more interested in deconstructing masculinity. And that is what I also do in my regular basis of work. I study and talk with young boys, especially boys, and try to realize how they are being initiated to masculinity or to toxic masculinity for that matter. And also in trying to encourage people to break from one mold of the social construct. Feminism may create another mold, the mold of a strong woman, able woman. We, in our turn, also talk about, we make it a point that feminism should realize the limitations of this ableist feminism. For that matter, that a woman can be a very a docile woman, a weak woman. That woman can also be a victim of patriarchy, and feminism should address them as well. And I think the biggest evolution of feminism is that it has become not only a movement of women, but of all the people. And we work with boys as well, with men as well. Some people call them feminists, some people call them ally, and not feminists. But as a whole, we have a lot of men with us, and that I think makes a difference. And of course, we have shifted from the binary to the spectrum, and I think Chand and Ekabali will focus on this. We have denounced the gender roles of male and women. But not only that, we have finally we are finally in the way of denouncing or renouncing the male-female binary as a whole and moving towards a gender spectrum where a person can claim herself to be a female or male despite whatever biological sex she or he is born with. So I think these are the developments that we are going through in our movements, and that doesn't mean that we actually inherit what they have done, and we are evolution. The feminism is going through evolution and further developments. That is it. We are not very different from their movement. We are just a continuation of it.
Thank you so much, Satabdi. We will now move on to Meera ma'am from the senior group, where we would, I know this junior senior term is, we have talked about it, but for now, for convenience sake, I'm just using it. So, ma'am, the people who are here now, the younger people right now, and the kind of movement that is going on, we would like to know the kind of connections that you feel towards it with the new activists, with the new academicians, with the and the kind of distances that you feel towards the way things are done now in feminism. It can be any movement. You can just talk about a movement and how it was dealt with. Uh, just over to you, ma'am.
No, uh, I don't see a distance with all the young people who spoke and the experiences Satabdi has also put across many of the intersectional issues. I don't feel that there is anything about distance or that differences in the way, because it's been such diverse experiences and moments when they link with associations, whether with feminism or with with whatever association they feel, and they have become part of some movement or the other. I don't see a distance in it. I just see that it's a different kind of. I see it as part of diverse experiences, and a multiplicity of identities. And I think that is that is very crucial to today's movement, is that this whole thing about not only intersectional sort of feminisms, but also different ways, multiple experiences of patriarchies in that, and those are historically specific from region, time, different kind of sexualities, aging, disability. So I think within these frames we need to they are sort of linked in that sense. But also, I like to say that one needs to also bring in the overall the role of the state and the political environment. You cannot just keep that out of our experiences, whether you're talking about the law on decriminalizing or criminalizing sexualities, my sexual minorities. The role of the state is very important. And what are the shifts that are taking place, the narrowing of democratic spaces, and therefore in that, what is the nature of and from today's discussion we can see how there are these different conversations at different levels that we are conducting, and so it's not just about senior and junior, or it's about all of us are becoming something else also. In these contexts we are changing because we are responding to specific situations. That is, there in a situation where the dialogue with the state is almost, it's closed up, and state institutions have become centralized, and they are getting misused. And if you take Bengal, or how the democratic space is, what's happening, and how violence has become a political template of violence that is linked with the state. These sort of in a very significant way also impact the way in which we engage. So I think that's why I think the conversations of these kind that we have in the history conclave are very much important, because these are the spaces now that exist for us to talk to each other, listen to our own experiences, and how we see the world around us, how we see ourselves changing. Do we have any more hopes of change? How do we see that change is taking place? I think the overall political situation, the role of the state, and the centralization that's taking place, the kind of, you have to say, the fundamentalist kind of, what do you call, homogenization that is taking place, the intolerance, intolerance, how it affects us, say, as women, as individuals, as citizens. It's a citizenship issue itself. All of us, and particularly now, I think these are very strong movements that are there. Is the anti-caste, intersectional feminisms. There's a lot of debates about Dalit, Bahujan, and then debates about alliances, intersectional alliances and intergenerational experience sharing. So I think there are a lot of, we just need to uh, carry this conversation forward to say that, in our different spaces that we exist now, what is the levels at which you can continue to engage, given this, the kind of political environment that is there. There is violence also. So a political template of violence. There's the COVID. Nothing like. This COVID experiences where you're all in your individual households, and where, according to all statistics, domestic violence is at a very high. And not only domestic violence, women's work has declined, the spaces for women's work. So our spaces are actually of us to sort of engage. So we have to find those spaces, and I think today's this conclave is one such space where, we have these conversations. That it's very important to keep our morals and to keep questioning things, uh, even receive knowledge. And also, if whatever kind of investigations we are doing, research, historical or otherwise, we just need to, we are creating alternative knowledges. And that's happening in the Dalit, in fact, in the Dalit Bahujan, there's women's collectives. There's a lot of discussion going on about alternate knowledge. What are the sources of that knowledge? And then having discussions around them. So I think these possibilities are there a lot, and I think in the Bengal context, I must say, because I attended the Jadavpur, the students held the women's conclave, and twice I attended it, and it was really very interesting because I suddenly found that, what we are talking about, the intergenerational, what are the issues that concerning the younger students and the youth, what is it that they are interested in, what are their concerns. And one of the things I really found missing was caste. There has to be that kind of, in both the Jadavpur University, both the women's conclave that I held, and in the political discussions also. I think that the anti-caste intersectional feminism, that there has to be some more of those kind of discussions taking place, so that we, it's sort of, I think that this is one of the most dynamic, particularly with the citizenship discussion going on among large number of Muslim young women who are coming in, the debates that are taking place within feminist debates taking place among the Muslim organizations and communities. So there are a whole lot of things which we are not always aware of, or we are not exposed to. But I think conversations like this, we can uh, get it more focused. Today was actually setting the kind of setting the kind of stage for how do we, have this intergenerational and intersectional kind of debates and our own personal experiences. How do we build that into that and have that, bring it out? But I think now we can sort of go into more into, uh, some of the, I think the sexualities, sexual minorities, disability, aging, these are very sort of violence, and what the kind of violence that's taking place, and what is the ways of it can be addressed, particularly in COVID. We are in a pandemic and we are in lockdowns, So I think we can just move into that, because even in Kerala, we've had a lot of discussions on specific kind of, violences